The dried herbs arrived at Reverend Samuel Parris's home on October 13, 1692, wrapped in black cloth and bearing no sender's name. Inside the package lay a collection of carefully preserved plants: foxglove with its purple bell-shaped flowers, deadly nightshade with its ominous dark berries, and water hemlock with roots that could kill a grown man within hours. But it wasn't the plants themselves that made Reverend Parris's blood run cold. It was the note tucked beneath them, written in elegant feminine handwriting: "These are the Lord's instruments of justice. May they bring peace to Salem's tormented souls. M. Ashford." Martha Ashford had been dead for 3 weeks, executed as a witch after confessing to practicing the dark arts. Yet here was proof that her work continued even from beyond the grave. Before we uncover the terrifying truth about Salem's most dangerous woman and the garden of death she cultivated in the shadow of the witch trials, we need you to join our community of dark history enthusiasts. Hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments what state you're watching from. The mystery of Martha Ashford's poison garden would remain Salem's most closely guarded secret for over 2 centuries, hidden away in church archives and sealed family documents that were too dangerous to ever see the light of day. Salem, Massachusetts in 1692 was a community consumed by fear, suspicion, and religious hysteria. The witch trials that had begun earlier that year had torn through the fabric of Puritan society, turning neighbor against neighbor and creating an atmosphere where accusations of witchcraft could destroy entire families overnight. The village of roughly 2,000 souls lived under the constant shadow of the supernatural. Strange afflictions had struck young girls throughout the community, causing them to writhe in apparent agony, speak in tongues, and claim they were being tortured by invisible forces. The authorities, convinced they were dealing with the devil himself, had launched an unprecedented campaign to root out witchcraft in all its forms. By October 1692, the Salem witch trials had already claimed 19 lives through execution, with dozens more languishing in prison awaiting their fate. The community lived in a state of perpetual terror, where a simple accusation could lead to arrest, trial, and death. It was in this atmosphere of paranoia and religious fervor that Martha Ashford had established herself as one of Salem's most trusted healers. Martha was a widow of 45 who had arrived in Salem 5 years earlier, settling into a modest cottage on the outskirts of the village where she could tend to her extensive gardens in relative privacy. She had quickly gained a reputation as a skilled herbalist and midwife, someone who could ease the pain of childbirth, treat fevers, and provide remedies for ailments that conventional medicine couldn't address. The townspeople of Salem had welcomed Martha's services, particularly the women who found in her a source of knowledge and comfort during difficult times. In an era when medical care was primitive and often dangerous, Martha's plant-based remedies seemed like a godsend, offering relief from suffering without the harsh treatments favored by the town's physician. Martha Ashford's cottage became a pilgrimage site for Salem's suffering residents. Her garden, which stretched behind her home in carefully tended rows, contained over 100 different species of medicinal plants. She grew common herbs like chamomile and lavender alongside more exotic specimens that she had obtained through correspondence with herbalists in Boston and Europe. What set Martha apart from other folk healers was her extensive knowledge of plant properties and her meticulous approach to preparing remedies. She maintained detailed journals documenting the effects of different combinations of herbs, noting which treatments worked best for specific conditions and carefully recording any adverse reactions. Martha's patients included some of Salem's most prominent citizens. Reverend Parris's own wife had consulted her for chronic headaches that had plagued her for years. Judge Samuel Sewell, who presided over many of the witch trials, had sought her help for his recurring digestive problems. Even Cotton Mather, the influential minister who was one of the leading advocates for aggressive prosecution of witches, had quietly visited Martha's cottage seeking treatment for his own mysterious ailments. The irony was not lost on those who knew the truth. While Salem's authorities were executing women for allegedly practicing witchcraft, some of those same officials were secretly consulting with a woman whose knowledge of plants and their effects far exceeded anything that could be learned through conventional study. Martha's success as a healer brought her both respect and suspicion. In a community where any unusual knowledge or skill could be interpreted as evidence of supernatural influence, her remarkable abilities made some residents uncomfortable. Whispers began to circulate about the source of her expertise and whether her cures might involve more than simple herbal remedies. The death of Elizabeth Hartwell on September 3, 1692, marked the beginning of Martha Ashford's descent from healer to killer. Elizabeth, a wealthy merchant's wife, had been one of Martha's most vocal supporters, defending the herbalist against whispers of witchcraft and recommending her services to other prominent families. Elizabeth had come to Martha complaining of severe stomach pains and nausea that had persisted for weeks. Her husband, Thomas Hartwell, had already consulted with Dr. William Griggs, the town's physician, who had been unable to provide any relief. In desperation, Elizabeth had turned to Martha, hoping that herbal remedies might succeed where conventional medicine had failed. Martha had prescribed a tea made from a blend of herbs that she claimed would soothe Elizabeth's digestive system and restore her health. The treatment initially seemed successful. Elizabeth reported feeling better within hours of taking the first dose and expressed gratitude for Martha's expertise. However, Elizabeth's condition took a dramatic turn for the worse on the third day of treatment. She began experiencing violent convulsions, her skin took on a grayish pallor, and her breathing became labored. Most disturbing of all, Elizabeth seemed to slip in and out of consciousness, sometimes appearing completely unresponsive before suddenly awakening in apparent terror. Dr. Griggs was summoned to examine Elizabeth, but by the time he arrived, she had fallen into a state that appeared to be death. Her pulse was undetectable, her breathing had stopped, and her body had begun to grow cold. The physician officially pronounced her dead and attributed her passing to the stomach ailment that had been troubling her. What no one knew at the time was that Martha had been watching the Hartwell house from a distance, carefully observing the effects of her special tea blend. The herbs she had given Elizabeth were not intended to heal. They were designed to create the appearance of death while keeping the victim conscious and aware of everything happening around them. Martha had developed this particular combination of plants through years of secret experimentation, testing different alkaloids and compounds until she had achieved the perfect balance. The mixture included extracts from water hemlock, which could induce paralysis and respiratory depression, combined with compounds from foxglove that would slow the heart to barely detectable levels. Martha Ashford's garden was a masterpiece of deadly cultivation, containing the most comprehensive collection of poisonous plants in colonial America. Behind her cottage, hidden from casual observers by tall sunflowers and climbing vines, she had created separate sections for different categories of toxic specimens. The paralytic section contained plants that could induce the death-like state that had claimed Elizabeth Hartwell. Water hemlock grew alongside poison sumac, while carefully tended patches of deadly nightshade produced the berries that Martha would dry and grind into powder. She had even managed to cultivate castor bean plants, whose seeds contained ricin, one of the most potent natural toxins known to exist. Martha's journals, discovered years later, revealed the scientific precision with which she approached her work. She had developed methods for extracting and concentrating active compounds, creating preparations that were far more potent than simple herbal teas. Her notes described techniques for timing dosages to achieve specific effects and methods for combining different toxins to create unique symptom patterns. The most chilling aspect of Martha's research was her systematic study of how different poisons affected her victims. She had been observing the effects of her preparations for years, carefully documenting how long it took for paralysis to set in, how effectively her compounds could mimic death, and most importantly, how long victims remained conscious while appearing dead. Martha's motivation for developing these deadly preparations became clear through her private writings. She had become convinced that Salem was in the grip of true evil, but not the kind that the witch trials were supposed to address. In her view, the real monsters were the men who used accusations of witchcraft to destroy innocent women while hiding their own corruption and cruelty. Judge William Stoughton, who had sentenced more women to death than any other official, had been having an affair with a young servant girl while publicly condemning others for moral failings. Reverend Nicholas Noyes, who had pronounced curses upon executed women, had been embezzling money from the church collection. These hypocrites, in Martha's mind, deserved a far worse fate than simple execution. Elizabeth Hartwell's death was not Martha's first kill, but it marked the beginning of her most ambitious campaign of revenge. Over the following weeks, Martha began systematically targeting the men who had been most enthusiastic in prosecuting alleged witches, using her reputation as a healer to gain access to her intended victims. Her next target was Deputy Sheriff George Herrick, who had been responsible for arresting many of the accused women and had shown particular cruelty in his treatment of prisoners. Herrick had developed painful kidney stones and had quietly sought Martha's help after Dr. Griggs had been unable to provide relief. Martha prepared a special treatment for Herrick, telling him that the herbs needed to be taken at specific times to be most effective. She provided him with measured doses of her paralytic compounds, instructing him to take the medicine just before bedtime when his body would be most receptive to healing. The deputy sheriff followed Martha's instructions exactly, consuming the deadly preparation on the night of September 15th. His wife found him the next morning in a state that appeared to be peaceful death, his body showing no signs of struggle or distress. The town mourned the loss of a respected law enforcement officer, never suspecting that he had spent his final hours fully conscious but unable to move or call for help. Martha's third victim was Thomas Putnam Jr., one of the most vocal accusers in the witch trials. Putnam had been responsible for initiating charges against numerous women and had testified aggressively in trial after trial. When he came to Martha complaining of persistent headaches and difficulty sleeping, she saw an opportunity to deliver justice. The treatment Martha prepared for Putnam was particularly sophisticated, designed to create the appearance that he had died in his sleep from natural causes. She gave him a preparation that would take effect gradually, allowing him to return home and settle into bed before the paralytic effects began. Putnam's death on September 22 was attributed to apoplexy, a common diagnosis for sudden deaths that couldn't be otherwise explained. His family mourned his passing while Martha watched from a distance, satisfied that another of Salem's persecutors had received the punishment he deserved. As Martha continued her campaign of revenge, she made a calculated decision that would ultimately lead to her downfall. Rather than maintaining her low profile as a simple herbalist, she began inserting herself into the witch trial proceedings, offering her services as an expert on supernatural afflictions. Martha presented herself to the court as someone who could identify the signs of genuine witchcraft and distinguish them from natural illnesses or psychological conditions. Her extensive knowledge of plants and their effects on the human body gave her credibility with officials who were struggling to understand the mysterious symptoms affecting Salem's young women. What the authorities didn't realize was that Martha was using her position to study the accusers and identify new targets for her poison garden. She paid particular attention to the men who seemed most eager to condemn innocent women, noting their names and learning about their personal habits and health concerns. Martha's involvement with the trials also gave her the opportunity to test her theories about induced death-like states. She began to suspect that some of the women who had been executed as witches might have actually been victims of poisoning, either accidental or deliberate. The symptoms described in trial testimony, convulsions, paralysis, temporary unconsciousness, matched the effects of compounds she had been developing. This realization led Martha to a horrifying conclusion. Salem's witch trials were not just a case of mass hysteria and judicial corruption, but potentially a cover for systematic murder. Someone else might be using poison to kill inconvenient women and then attributing their deaths to witchcraft. Martha's investigation into this possibility led her to focus on Dr. William Griggs, the physician who had first diagnosed the afflicted girls and had been instrumental in launching the witch trial hysteria. Griggs had been present at many suspicious deaths and had consistently attributed unusual symptoms to supernatural causes rather than investigating natural explanations. Martha's suspicions about Dr. Griggs proved to be terrifyingly accurate. Through careful observation and discreet inquiries, she discovered that the physician had been conducting his own experiments with toxic plants, using his medical authority to cover up a series of murders that had been attributed to witchcraft. Griggs had been targeting women who posed threats to his reputation or financial interests, using his knowledge of poisons to eliminate them while ensuring that their deaths would be blamed on supernatural forces. The witch trial hysteria had provided him with perfect cover for his crimes, as any unusual death could be attributed to witchcraft rather than investigated as potential murder. Martha realized that she and Griggs had been pursuing parallel courses of action, both using plant-based poisons to kill their enemies while hiding behind different facades. The crucial difference was that Martha saw herself as dispensing justice against corrupt officials, while Griggs was simply eliminating anyone who inconvenienced him. The discovery of Griggs's crimes presented Martha with a moral dilemma. She had been justifying her own murders as righteous punishment for men who had destroyed innocent women. But if she exposed Griggs, she would risk revealing her own activities and potentially face execution herself. Martha's solution was characteristically calculated and ruthless. Rather than expose Griggs publicly, she decided to eliminate him using her most sophisticated poison preparation yet. She would make his death appear to be the result of witchcraft, ensuring that he would be remembered not as a respected physician but as a victim of the same dark forces he had been pretending to combat. Martha approached Griggs claiming that she had developed a new treatment for the mysterious afflictions affecting Salem's children. She told him that her herbal preparation could protect him from supernatural attacks while also enhancing his ability to diagnose witchcraft in others. Dr. Griggs consumed Martha's final poison preparation on October 10, 1692, in the privacy of his study while reviewing medical notes about the afflicted girls. The compound Martha had developed was her masterpiece, a combination of alkaloids that would create the most terrifying death possible while ensuring that the victim remained conscious throughout the entire ordeal. Griggs realized what was happening as the paralysis began to set in, but by then it was too late to call for help or take any countermeasures. Martha had timed the dose perfectly, ensuring that the effects would begin just as evening fell and the doctor would not be missed until the following morning. What Griggs experienced during his final hours was beyond imagination, complete paralysis combined with full awareness, as his body slowly shut down while his mind remained trapped inside. Martha had designed this particular preparation to make the victim appear dead to casual observation while ensuring that they remained conscious long enough to understand exactly what was happening to them. The discovery of Griggs's body the next morning created a sensation in Salem. The physician who had been instrumental in diagnosing witchcraft had apparently fallen victim to the same supernatural forces he had been fighting. The irony was not lost on a community already consumed by paranoia and fear. However, Martha's triumph was short-lived. Among Griggs's papers, investigators found notes describing his own experiments with plant-based poisons and evidence of his involvement in several suspicious deaths. More damaging still, they discovered correspondence between Griggs and Martha discussing herbal preparations and their effects on various patients. Faced with evidence linking her to the dead physician and his crimes, Martha made a decision that surprised everyone who knew her. Rather than flee or deny the charges, she confessed to everything, not just her involvement with Griggs, but her entire campaign of revenge against Salem's corrupt officials. Martha's confession was a masterwork of calculated manipulation. She admitted to the murders while presenting herself as an instrument of divine justice, claiming that God had given her the knowledge and ability to punish men who had perverted his holy work. She described her victims not as innocent casualties but as corrupt hypocrites who had used accusations of witchcraft to hide their own evil deeds. The authorities found themselves in an impossible position. Martha's confession implicated several respected officials in serious crimes while also revealing that the witch trial proceedings had been compromised by corruption and ulterior motives. Publishing her full testimony would have destroyed what remained of Salem's social order and called into question the validity of all the trials and executions. The solution was to execute Martha quickly and quietly while suppressing most of her confession. She was tried, convicted, and hanged on October 22, 1692, with only a brief summary of her crimes made public. The detailed evidence of official corruption and the full extent of her poison garden's deadly harvest were sealed away in church archives, deemed too dangerous for public consumption. The package of herbs that appeared at Reverend Parris's door 3 weeks after Martha's execution was never fully explained. Some believed it had been prepared in advance and delivered by an unknown accomplice. Others suspected that Martha had somehow arranged for the delivery from beyond the grave, as a final demonstration of the knowledge that had made her Salem's most dangerous resident. What do you think happened to Martha Ashford's poison garden? Do you believe all her secrets died with her, or might there still be dangerous knowledge buried in Salem's archives? Leave your theories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of dark history that will keep you awake at night. See you in the next video, where we'll explore another chapter in humanity's darkest secrets.